I don't know how to introduce this podcast. It's the first episode here, Viking Voices. I'm your host, Jaden Babiuk. The name was confirmed about 5 seconds ago, so I had about 5 seconds to make an intro. I'm here with Grant Larson from Leeds, North Dakota. Grant, good to have you here on the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I want you to do some introducing yourself because I don't want to be talking for you. The only thing I know is Leeds, North Dakota Elementary. Yeah, tell us what else you do on this VCSU campus.
Well, I've been very lucky. I've been riding this little VCSU wave for quite a while now, and they've been very good to me. I got here, as you said, I grew up in Leeds, North Dakota on a elk ranch, a farm and elk ranch is what we did. And so I had a agriculture and ranching background on one side and then a very dominant educational background on the other side. My mom was a second grade teacher. My grandpa was a history teacher. And with those things, I thought, well, those are kind of the two big backgrounds that I have, right? And I got to experience the farming for 18 years, and I was curious about this teaching thing. So I started touring different colleges, and I was curious to see what kind of education programs people had out there. And I went to VCSU, and I saw theirs, and just immediately I had a good gut feeling about this place. Something just felt right. So I said, yep, this is where I want to go. I want to go to VCSU and check out this program. And like I said, they've been very good to me so far. I remember the first year that I was here, I wasn't involved in very much, but one of the things that I remember from my tour was everybody talked about how, okay, when you get to VCSU, we know you on a first-name basis. That's something that we pride ourselves in. That's something that we want. And I said, okay, well, if that's the currency of this place, then I want to be rich, you know? So I took that resource guide that they gave me, and I was putting as many names to faces as I could, just trying to basically play the game that I was told about. And I think in some way that made me stand out a little bit, if I had to guess, because I knew the name of Aaron Ettinger. I knew the name of Aaron Klingenberg, Aaron Heidi. I knew I knew Larry Brooks' name, and when I saw those people walking down the hallway, I made an effort to say hi to them. And then from there, I got recommended to be an NSO crew leader, and I said, yeah, why not? I'll do that. And from there, that just kept snowballing into more and more things that I got involved with, and it's been a fantastic ride so far.
Right on. Well, before we talk about everything you're involved in, Leeds, North Dakota, how big is that?
Leeds is about 450 people, I think. So it's a tiny, tiny little town. It's one of those environments where everybody knows everybody. You see people at the grocery store who went to 6th grade with your grandpa or your grandma. It's that kind of environment. And it was a wonderful place to grow up. Tiny little town. We lived outside of town on a farm. And it was a great, great place to live. I think my family got there in the early 1900s or so. Wow. And we set up our little farm, and we've kind of stayed there ever since. So it's been a wonderful environment.
Love that. And how far from Valley City?
How far? Oh, let's see. For me, it's about a 2.5-hour drive north.
Okay, that's not bad.
If it's like Devil's Lake here, Rugby here, and then Leeds is like right in the middle.
Gotcha. Okay, I've driven by Devil's Lake on my way to school, but haven't seen Leeds. But again, I understand why now. 400 people.
Yeah, I said,
easy to miss. I bet
it's pretty tiny.
That's right. So you're involved in a lot. I know you're involved in a lot. I was at your homecoming court celebration where you were named homecoming king, and they just kept listing things. So I want you to list all of them, and I want you to provide maybe the Cliff Notes version of what kind of everything you do with those clubs are.
Sure. So, I mean, like I said, the first thing that I got involved in was being a new student orientation crew leader, and for what we do with that, we're student assistants, basically, who help with the incoming freshmen, and we help to basically, I mean, as it says in the name, we help to get them oriented. And what I've enjoyed so much about that, especially now that I'm older and a senior, is that I've met so many of my friends that I hang out with through NSO, so that's been excellent for me. Another thing that I got involved with was there was one year I became vice president of the Trap Club, and that was an excellent experience, and I worked my way up the ranks and became president later on, and then petitioned for what's now the shooting sports team, which we can get into a little bit more.
We will. We
if
definitely
you want. Let's see, other things. There was this thing, it was called the Fisheries Club. And I said, that sounds interesting. And I went and checked that out, and I'm involved with that. The Fisheries Club goes to, some of the things that they do is they'll go to different areas, different lakes, different rivers, and they'll have these sponsored fishing excursions. And that's been a great thing to do. Let's see, I got involved with a couple different honor societies. I was in the National Society for Leadership and Success, and then ALD on campus here for freshmen who got 4.0s. What were some of the other things? I'm involved with Chi Alpha, which is Vikings for Christ, and that's been very grounding, and it keeps my head straight and keeps my ego down. So it's been very good. It's been great to be a part of that. I've met a lot of good people from that place too. Let's see, a couple other things. I mean, these aren't necessarily club involvements necessarily, but we have a new vice president for student affairs this year. And in, I believe it was April or May of this year, I got an email from President Lefebvre saying, would you like to be the student representative for the hiring committee for this position that we need to fill? And I said, why not? I'm not really in the business of saying no to things, as you could tell by the list. I try not to say no to something unless I feel like I can't do it, because that was my thing when I came in here freshman year. Is I mean, I'm not going to lie, I was a pretty ignorant little freshman. I didn't know what I was doing. And
we all are.
And I just said to myself, you know what? I'm going to say yes to as many things as I can and just see where it takes me. And it's taken me quite a few places.
Yeah, it appears that it has. And, you know, that's just such a great thing to hear. Like, I mean, as soon as you open up your mind to all these different possibilities, the things you'd be saying no to that turn into yeses, and you're like, you know, for me right now, like, what am I doing talking to you here on a podcast? I wouldn't have thought of that my freshman year, like you said, ignorant freshman. But so I do want to get into that trap club, because that's something interesting, new to VCSU this year. Now, the first ever shooting sport, I understand, at VCSU.
Yep.
So I'd love you to talk about how you got that, you know, got up the ranks first, how you petitioned for that to become an official shooting sport, and just kind of how that's looking right now. It's your time to promote it right here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So how I worked up the ranks in the trap club was fairly straightforward. I mean, I guess it doesn't really take a lot to work up the ranks initially. What you have to do if you're in any club, if you're committed to the club and you're involved in the club and you care about its trajectory, people are going to recognize that. The advisor of the club is going to recognize that, and he's going to reach out to you. The current president, Bridger, at the time, must have saw something in me that he thought he could work with. So I was vice president that year, and I did as much with that as I could. And later on, so it was vice president. Shooting sports team started as I was vice president. That was one of the things that I wanted to be one of my projects to take on. Our president at the time was Logan, and he was more specialized with other areas, so I took on some of the more personal relationships, that sort of stuff. And then since that became a success, then I got the presidency later on, and I've been working as hard as I can to keep building that thing as much as possible. Now, shooting sports team. Okay, so here's how it kind of went down. So I was an RA and involved. That was one of the things I forgot to mention. I was an RA too. So I was an RA on campus, and we had a situation going on that I wasn't involved in, but I had information on. And Erin Klingenberg emailed me because she needed the details of it, and she said, you can either write it up in an email to me, or you can come and talk to me in person. And it was kind of complicated, so I wanted to go and talk to her in person. Sat down in her office, explained the situation. As we were finishing that topic, she mentioned, you know, I know that you're on the trap club. I see that you guys have had a fair amount of success. You won a state tournament in April, and I know from being on the president's cabinet that there's been some light discussion about the possibility of you guys advancing to being a officially recognized sport. And I said, oh, really? Is that, you know, if that's the case, how would someone pursue something like that? And huge shout out to her, because this is stuff that I didn't know. I mean, how do you, when you're a sophomore, you don't know how to do this stuff, but thankfully she did, and she was excellent in guiding me through all the steps and saying, okay, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to talk to this person, you need to talk to this person. And this was mid-October of 2023. So I did all that, I did all the steps, went and talked to Nick Galt, our advisor, and said, okay, here's this opportunity that we have. It might not work, but we don't really have anything to lose from pursuing it. So let's try it. Let's see where it goes. So I got back to Aaron Klingenberg and said, yep, we're in. Let's try it. And the date that we got to go and present was originally November 13th. Okay, so I've got about a month to prepare for this thing. A month is plenty of time. So I created this big PowerPoint that had every little piece of information I could think of. Okay, here's what it would look like in the future. Here's what we would need to get it started. Many, many more things. Here's some statistics. Because one of the things, I mean, we deal with firearms, right? So there's always the question of safety.
That's right.
So everybody wants to know that. We detailed that as much as we could, all the logistics associated with that. And I got this big PowerPoint ready to go. And it was my responsibility to do most of the talking. Nick Galt was going to be there, but this was my idea. This was my thing. It was on me. I wake up that morning. I'm ready to go. I've got my PowerPoint. I've gone over it many, many times. I've lost sleep over this thing. I know this thing. I could just about quote that PowerPoint. A couple hours before, and this was no one's fault. This was just some things got broken up in communication. Other things within VCSU happened that the cabinet had to deal with, and it got rescheduled about 3 hours before I was supposed to go. And I was like, oh my goodness, we just, because it felt like it was all slipping away. You know, again, it was nobody's fault, but it was like, here's this thing I spent a month preparing for, and now it feels like it just slipped away from me right a couple hours before I was supposed to go. So then there was kind of a delay. There was this postponement where I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I assumed that they were going to reschedule us at some point, but I didn't know when that was going to be. And it ended up being January 3rd is the new date that they gave us. Okay, so this time I went in and I got to do it, and I got to present and go through everything. And it was about 55 minutes of talking and going through these slides and answering questions. And I remember, now I look back on it, and I'm so thankful that I got to do it and that I was the person chosen for it. But at the time, it was all of this weight on me is what it felt like, because, you know, it's not like where you're going into an exam, say, and if this thing fails, okay, well, it only affects you.
Right.
If this didn't work and I ended up with egg all over my face, it would have been a lot more than me. It would have felt like a lost opportunity for all these people that I was asked to represent and advocate for. So it was some of the most, at the time, it was just this significant pressure that I felt.
Yeah.
Because it was this, you know, I care about those people that I represent, and it felt like such a big responsibility to advocate for them. So I studied for it again and prepared for it again, and I went in there and I said, okay, I've done everything I can, and I'm just going to let it roll.
Yeah.
And we got through it, and you could see that most of them were receptive to it, which was good to see. And I went in there, I sat down in that chair thinking we had maybe a 20% chance, and that was just a guess. I left that chair thinking we've got maybe a 50% chance. So I felt good about it. I knew that I did everything I could. And I walked out of there, and then from that point, it was hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait, just listen for more information. We got a little bit in February, and we heard that it was going well, and they were interested in it and wanted to pursue it seriously as something that could be launched. And then in March, late March, I get an email saying the president would like to talk to you in his office. And I see on the calendar invite, it's me, and it's Dr. Galt, and it's Larry Brooks, and it's the president. So I sit down in that chair, and the president is about from me to you away, and he slides me this paper, and he says the VCSU Trap Club will be recognized as an intercollegiate sport effective fall 2024. And success.
Yeah.
And it was such an amazing feeling, because it was all of this work and all of this planning that went into it. And I was very thankful to be a part of that. And I was glad that I was the one chosen for it, because now what it means is we have a way bigger budget. Mm-hmm. It over doubled our budget on top of now we have $5,000 worth of waivers that we get to disperse to people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a direct financial benefit to all of these people that I represent and oversee now. And it felt so wonderful to provide for those people. Like that's why I did it, is because I want to build something that is what the people want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a man doing what the people want. And that's what I try to do. And I'm so thankful to, like I said, Dr. Klingenberg, because she did a lot of the heavy lifting in the start as far as setting me up. Because like I said, I didn't know how to do that. That was a lot of her work. I'm extremely thankful to Nick Galt as well, because he could have said, no, this is a bad idea. We don't need to do this. And he didn't. He was supportive of it and wanted to go through with it. I can say the same thing about all the members of the cabinet. It would have been very easy for them to just say, we're not interested. Thanks, though. But they didn't do that. They took this and saw that something could be made out of it. So it shows you the kind of people at VCSU that they'll take this request and this petition from these students seriously, and the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great story. That's, I mean, a testament to how many opportunities you have at this school just to be able to do something like that. And, you know, I commend you. That's quite a process. That's something I don't know I would make it through, right? It took me one yes to make this podcast. I don't think I would have made it months and months, and a bunch of slides and a PowerPoint and then a rescheduling. So, yeah, no, what a great story. And, let's dive into that a little bit more. So, as someone from not a farming background, I'm from a big city back up in Canada. What would be your 5-minute pitch to someone who wants to join the Trap Club?
My 5-minute pitch to someone who wants to join the Trap Club would have to be one of the okay, so let's say, not everybody is born 6'7" and a super athlete, right? That happens to very few people. With Trap, you have an opportunity to compete in a sport and get good at it rather quickly and get skilled at it rather quickly without being some physical powerhouse, some 6'7" natural athlete. You can be who you are. It doesn't matter. It's not a sport that requires you to run a mile. It's not something that requires you to jump 6 feet in the air or anything like that. It's something that you can do as you are. And we're a co-ed sport. It's men and women, because it's one of those sports where, it's not like this is wrestling or football where it makes sense to separate men and women. All you're doing is you're standing on a platform and you're knocking a clay target out of the air with a shotgun. So my 5-minute pitch to someone would be, here's an opportunity that you have. Maybe you're someone like me, where I was not good at basketball. I was not a football person. That wasn't my wheelhouse. But I found this thing called Trap, and I said, oh, that's interesting. And I went and took a look at it, and it was the first time that I was good at a sport. And what that did to my confidence and what that did to my perception of myself, before I perceived myself as someone who wasn't athletic. I'm still not that athletic, but someone who wasn't good at sports, someone that I wasn't cut out for it. But I found this thing, and I realized, okay, I'm okay at this. I might actually be good at this. And you get that connection too. Now you have your community. You have this community within a sport that I never had before. So that would be my pitch to someone is, even if you're not a particularly skilled shooter, we still take you. The club didn't go anywhere. We have the shooting sports team added to it, but the club didn't go anywhere, and we're not gonna be upset with you if you only hit a couple targets. We'll train you in. That's that's part of the reason that the club stayed, is because we didn't want to take any opportunities away from someone. So that's what it offers to people, is opportunity to participate in a sport regardless of whether or not you're an athletic powerhouse.
I love that because, as someone who is in sports, I feel like some of these clubs and organizations are so underrepresented, and I think they need more representation, and that's why, I brought you on, is, this is a really cool opportunity for a lot of people. Like you said, you don't have to be this powerhouse. You don't have to be physically gifted. That's just excellent to hear that, it's one of those things where it's like it boosted your confidence, all that. And yeah, that's so great to hear. And I commend you for all you did for that. And so I have a couple more questions about the Trap Club, actually. more so on the shooting sports side.
Mm-hmm.
What events do you guys got coming up?
So what we've got coming up on Saturday, October 5th, we've got it's called the Bison Blast Tournament. So it's hosted by NDSU down at the Horace Shooting Park. I think this is about the 4th year that they've put it on, and we're going to go to that thing this year. So what it is you've got all these different college teams coming to this venue to compete. And so it'll be us, it'll of course be NDSU, Dickinson, I believe, is going to be there, Wahpeton's going to be there, Jamestown's going to be there. Pretty much everybody that's got a trap program is going to be going down there. And so we've got that coming up soon. I'll stay on track here. We've had just recently, in the past here, we had the Bismarck. We had a tournament in Bismarck, same thing. Now, how those tournaments work is you shoot 100 rounds, so you're shooting 100 targets. You get your score out of 100. And that goes into two things. Your score out of 100 gets added up with your team to make a team score, but you also have your individual score. And that individual score is used for individual rankings and individual awards. We had a pretty successful first tournament. We had Casey, who's one of our freshmen this year. He's an excellent shot. I was one of the people that I was looking at earlier in the spring, and I said, "Oh, okay, this guy's got potential. We need to reach out to this guy," and we did that. And I'm glad we did because he won the high overall standing. So what that means is that there's the trap aspect to it, which is when you're shooting at clays going away, and then there's also what's called doubles trap, where it's throwing two clays at the same time.
Wow.
So then what you do is you take the guy's score from singles trap and the guy's score from doubles trap, and you add it together, and he had the highest one out of anybody at the tournament. And then we also had Logan Heen, who's my age, who won the doubles section. So we brought home 2 trophies from that, and I'm very proud of those two, and they've represented us very well so far. So that's what we had just recently. We've got the Fargo tournament coming up. Fast forwarding to April a little bit is when we'll have our next state tournament. That'll be in Jamestown, and we've got quite a few more weeks of shooting up until then. How the regular, it's called like your league season, how that works is it's 6 weeks. You've got what's called your reserve week, which I can explain, and then week 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you shoot that at your own venue, whatever that is for you. So Jamestown shoots in Jamestown, Valley City shoots in Valley City. And you have deadlines to submit those scores, and then those scores are compared, and you go off of your rankings based on that. So that's what we've got coming up. We've got a couple more weeks of league scores, a tournament on Saturday, and then we've got a little bit of an off season in the winter, and then we'll start up again in March and start practicing and preparing for that state tournament in April.
Right on, and already some immediate success, like you just said. So,
Yeah.
couple guys bringing home some hardware.
Yeah, I'm proud of those two.
Yeah, and then final question I have for you is this all student led, or is there, for us there's a head coach, assistant coach, grad assistants, but the way it sounds right now, I've heard one person at the top, and then you're kind of right there.
Yep. So how it works is we've got the trap club and the shooting sports team. We've got 2 separate entities that are kind of one still. So technically what we've got is we've got Nick Galt, our advisor for the trap club, who was made the head coach of the shooting sports team. So the buck stops with him for the shooting sports team. He's the head guy for that. He's in charge of that thing nowadays, and he does an excellent job with it. So he's our head coach. He's the one who has our budget and does all of our budgeting and a lot of our planning. But one of the things that I have the privilege of doing as the president of the trap club is I get to work with him very closely for all of that stuff, because one of the things that we want is we want the shooting sports team and the trap club to still have continuity with each other, to still be going in the same direction. So I get to help with a lot of the shooting sports stuff and a lot of the planning on that, and other students get to do the same thing. Casey's our vice president this year. He gets to do a lot of that stuff right with me. We've got Brooke as an officer too, Brooke Godry. She is right there with all of us too. So we've got, as far as the shooting sports team concerned, Nick Galt is the head coach who has the authority on paper, but then we've got students right underneath him who are working with him and guiding this thing along. So
Gotcha.
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I mean that's It's that good little mix you got, right? And you've been involved in the trap club for how many years now? Is it 3?
This is my third year.
Third year, right on. Wow, that's great. It sounds like that club's come a long way, and then obviously to get to the shooting sports aspect and competing against other schools, that's great. Now I want to move on to something that happened just recently, and I was there in the building for it when you had a crown placed on your head to become the homecoming king. Why don't you talk about a little bit about how that happened? You know, if you know who nominated you, it sounds like there could have been a lot of different people, a lot of different clubs. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that experience and just,
Of course.
tell me about that.
Well, I mean, first of all, what an honor. I mean, it's another one of those things where you walk in the door as a freshman and you just don't think that that's going to happen to you. So I feel so fortunate that I've been in this position where I've got to do all these things, and everybody on that homecoming court deserved it, and that made it feel like even more of an honor to me, is because anybody could have got it, both on the men's and the women's side. That crown could have been placed on anybody's head, so I felt so lucky that enough people voted for me. I mean, I have no doubt it was a razor thin margin, but it felt good. I was proud of myself. It was something that I'll remember forever. And as far as who nominated me, I know that a few of my teammates did. I know that some of my close friends did. Aside from that, I'm not quite sure. I don't know how many I got or anything like that. I don't know how many votes I got, but I clearly got enough. And like I said, it was quite the experience. It's something that I'll remember forever.
So now, if I remember correctly, you were nominated first, the crown was placed on your head first, and then the women's was after.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there was a little show going on. There was a little bit of, hovering over the head, and then, oh, no, it's not you, kind of thing. There was a bit of showmanship. What did it feel like when it was finally placed on your head, and you're like, oh, this is for real now?
That's exactly what it felt like, is, oh, my goodness, this is for real now. This actually happened. And it was really, it was quite the experience. It was one of those things where, I mean, talk about a cherry on top.
That's right.
I mean, as I go through my final lap around the track, so to speak, it's been a very nice cherry on top of all this work and all of these projects and the various things that I've invested in. Because one of the things that I've tried hard to do, especially in these later years, is I've got so much from this place, and there's only so much of it that I can take with me, right? So why not try and spread the wealth a little bit? Why not try and have some of these other people experience some of this stuff and try and provide them and set them up with some of the same opportunities that I've had? And it felt, in a way, I guess maybe it felt like kind of that sounds a little bit, how would I say it? It felt like I got rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like maybe that meant something to some
Yeah.
people. Some of the things that I tried to do and some of the ways that I've tried to help people and make people feel as welcomed as I have, maybe some of that karma came back in my direction.
Well, homecoming king, Grant Larson, well-deserved. Let's get a little bit fun here. So I have a couple questions I'm going to ask you. It's going to make you think on your feet a little bit, I think. It's not going to be this is where we get informal.
Let's do it.
I'm going to start with this one. 3 items you can't live without.
3 items I can't live without. Let's see, a Bible, a fishing pole, and 3. We'll say a Bible, a fishing pole, and a shotgun.
Just like that. Bang. Care to elaborate on any of them? Or I think that's pretty straightforward.
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Next one. Favorite restaurant in Valley City?
Oh, boy. I would say, I don't know, Pizza Corner's a good go-to. That's a good go-to. If we're talking within Viking City, the Viking Eye is a nice place to go to. I love those wings.
Oh, yeah.
For whatever reason.
Wednesdays.
Oh, yeah.
Wednesdays.
Yeah, every Wednesday. So, yeah, I would say Pizza Corner outside of Valley City.
Okay, I feel like that would be a very popular choice. I feel like I think most guests that we're going to have in the future would probably say Pizza Corner's up there.
Bridges is another good one.
Yes.
Now that I think of it.
Yeah, I feel like there's not a lot of wrong options here. And, there's a new place opening up. It's a taco place. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. But there's so many good restaurants here. Third question, a talent you have that no one else may know. But the way it sounds, I feel like everyone knows every single one of your talents here because you've been involved in so much.
Let's see. Maybe something that many people don't know. Okay, have you ever seen Forged in Fire? Do you know what that TV show is?
I don't.
Okay, so basically one of these talents that I have that I got from my dad is blacksmithing, if you know what that is. It's where you're heating up hot steel
Yes.
and you're forging it into various tools. His specialty was knife making. So he would forge all these knives, and I remember being a little kid, and I would go into the shop, and I would see my dad pounding on this steel, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Just wait, and I'll show you what I'm making here." And he showed me just this beautiful Damascus knife, and I was like, "Yep, I want to do this when I'm older." So I did, and I've done that for 8 years now, I think. So that's one of the talents that I have that maybe not everybody knows about is I forge knives. So I take raw pieces of steel and heat it up to about 12 to 1500 degrees, I think, and forge it into a knife shape. And then you do a little bit of work on a grinder and you make a handle for it. There's all kinds of different tools that you can use for a handle. And I make the knife sheaths myself. I take sides of cow leather and cut it out and stamp it and stitch it and do all that. I've made a couple swords too, but those
my gosh, that's impressive. I don't know if I'd be able to handle steel at that heat. That is impressive. I feel like you can't have a forge in the dorms, so probably not many people would know.
That's back in Leeds.
Talent. That's right. Final question. I think you might like this one too. Is a period of history you'd like to live in? Maybe you're okay with right now, but I don't know. I feel like you'd have a good take on it.
Based on the stories from my grandparents when they were kids, it sounds like the 1950s was a real time to be alive. So I would take my grandparents' word for it and go see what the 1950s is like.
For some reason, I thought you'd like that question a lot. So, yeah. And then, honestly, the final question I have for you today, and it kind of goes back to what you started with at the beginning, but I'd love for you to kind of just zero in on this. But how did you end up at VCSU? And why did you ultimately choose VCSU?
I wish it was more complex than it is, but really I went here and I had an immediate gut feeling about this place. And one of the things that impressed me was on my tour, President Lefebvre came out of his office and went over across the hall to enrollment services and spent a couple minutes talking to the tour group that day. And I thought, wow, that's interesting that this guy, who I have no doubt is busier than anybody else, took the time to come and talk to us, these people who may or may not even go here. He might not even see us again. But I was impressed that he took the time to do that. And it really contributed to my impression of this place. And I said, this feels homey. This feels like a place that I want to go to. And it was just a good gut feeling. And it had, as I said, an excellent education program. And it was the 2 out of the 3 things that I wanted. The third thing that I wanted was to shoot trap. I wanted to keep doing that. I wanted to pursue that from high school because of how much that built me into a better person. And at the time, VCSU had this infant trap club that was kind of coming around. And I said, good enough for me. 1, 2, 3, check, check, check. Let's do it.
Look at that. It's that simple. Grant, thank you so much for your time. This was excellent. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks.
And I love the stories you shared, and I think this is going to be a great kickoff episode of the podcast. So, without further ado, with Viking Voices, I don't really know how to close out this podcast, Grant. It's my first time too. But I'm Jaden Babiuk. I'm your host of Viking Voices, and thank you for watching and or listening, and we'll see you for the next episode.